Well, there's a hypothesis that's turning out to be quite interesting. In 3IATLAS, the real target wouldn't be Jupiter, but rather Jupiter's moon, Ganymede. For those who have been close to many stories, even many legends and myths about the unidentified flying object topic, they'll find that there's a lot of information and many stories that talk about this. But even recently, it was leaked that at the end of 2020, a rather strange signal was detected coming from Ganymede. At the last moment, they said, no, don't worry, this is just geological movements, but the feeling remained that there was something there. Later, it was leaked to the press that in 2021, there was also an anomalous radio signal detected by the Juno probe. There are still doubts about what happened with that signal, although for now there is no data that can prove it was something strange. So there have been some strange things for a while. Now, the movement made by Atlas 3 seems to be heading toward that area. Let's dive into some interesting details. There's a tactical anomaly, where the new trajectory analysis suggests that the project identified as 3IATLAS may have modified its approach vector. Its final destination would not be the Jovian atmosphere, but rather a precise orbital insertion around Ganymede, the largest moon, by the way, in the entire solar system. The hypothesis. The hypothesis supports a correlation of events, an anomalous radio signal detected by the Juno probe at the end of 2020 and leaked by the press in 2021. Confidential sources indicate that the mission is not for exploration but for the recovery of non-human technology. Things are getting pretty strange now, aren't they? Obviously, we're talking about xenoarchaeology, let's say it, not pointing to a massive artificial structure trapped by the moon's orbit. Obviously, this is a hypothesis. It's something that obviously can't be known, at least for now. To grasp the scale of this leak, we need to look back to January 2021. Scientific media reported that National Aeronautics and Space Administration is Juno zone detected and frequency modulation radio signal coming from Ganymede. The official explanation, and we have to be very clear about this, was very quick and completely skeptical. The signal was generated by electrons oscillating in the magnetic field. It's a natural cyclotronic process. However, the persistence of the signal's modulation raised suspicions that there was something more. For example, among the intelligence community, SIGNET, they began to realize that there was something curious there, something strange that didn't necessarily have a natural explanation. What is proposed in the 3IATLAS theory obviously raises concerns, at least uncertainties. It suggests that National Aeronautics and Space Administration didn't hear noises, but rather a movement, a residual energy signature. Yes, this in 2021, if the Atlas has been using these 2020 coordinates as a guide, we're not dealing with a standard scientific mission, but rather a search and rescue operation. This is what they claim in this new theory, which obviously I insist, until we see it up close, we might understand what's happening here. This idea that's been circulating on the same website comes in, although he doesn't claim it's something already proven. He does say, imagine what could it be that shows all those anomalies. And when they start to imagine, well, they say an object, an archaic ship. Yes, I mean an ancient ship that would go to him, in this case, to the rescue, right? According to this. Of whatever is on this moon. Well, obviously, there are several things we need to understand. First, Ganymede is one of the many moons that Jupiter has. I mean, there are several within Jupiter. There are 95. Those are the officially recognized moons of Jupiter. With 95 moons recognized by the International Astronomical Union, it has the most moons of any planet in the solar system. The 4 largest and most famous moons, by the way, are Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. If those are the ones and there's one more missing, I'm missing one more. So it would be me, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. These, by the way, were discovered by Galileo in 1610. Ganymede is the largest moon in the solar system. Its large mass causes a strong gravitational pull, which allows it to attract and retain a large number of satellites. I'm referring to Jupiter. That's why it has so many moons. Because Jupiter is very massive, it's very large, and it attracts and keeps those moons around that planet. Now let's think, let's imagine, as he has said on several occasions. Because this hypothesis, by the way, is not from the OEB. I mean, this hypothesis really, literally, comes from amateur astronomers who have been making their own hypotheses and calculations. And I found this very interesting because it would make more sense for it to go to Ganymede than to Jupiter. Come on, what would happen if something like this were confirmed? What would happen? Even considering planetary defense and the global economy, would things change? Would there be reactions from people? What would happen also regarding the research that it has, Juno? Juno is a probe at Jupiter capable of detecting low-frequency signals that could be emitted by the comet itself, or in this case, if it were an artificial object. The curious thing about that signal Juno picked up in 2020 is that it crossed paths with this signal of unknown origin, and it wasn't just background noise. It wasn't just random, it was a transmission that seemed intentionally directed by someone or something. Yeah, it seemed like suddenly a switch was flipped and something sent a signal, right? And then it turned off. That's the most curious thing, which has also caused so much distrust, thinking that this information is just something temporary, like a geological event or other natural phenomena. What could it be? What? And as such a curious fact from previous years, could the story of Atlas himself be revolving around this? 13. Look, it's just to get an idea. Ganymede is known as the impossible moon because the moon Ganymede itself has a series of structural anomalies. It's the only moon in the solar system with a magnetosphere, which is unheard of. Moons are usually geologically dead moons. But Ganymede has an active molten iron core that generates a magnetic shield, partially protecting it from radiation. From the radiation, for example, that it itself generates. Jupiter generates radiation while Ganymede has a magnetic field just like Earth does. Of course, it's not as strong, but it does have a magnetic field that protects it at least partially from radiation. Ganymede has a hidden ocean beneath its 150-kilometer thick ice crust. That's how we confirmed a salty water ocean exists. It could be 100 kilometers deep and contain more liquid water than all of Earth's oceans combined. The oxygenated atmosphere. The Hubble telescope detected a thin atmosphere of oxygen, O2, and ozone there. It's not breathable for us. It shows active chemical processes exist that shouldn't occur in such a cold world. People don't know why, but no, there shouldn't be this kind of active chemical processes there. They're on a planet where no one can explain why or how. So here's a perspective that of the strangest place Comet 3 could go, right? Or the closest it could get would be Hypotheses among all the dunes and planets. The strangest place it could get close to is this place, apart from Earth, right? No, very interesting. At least look at everything from the outside, because these are hypotheses after all, right? They're not even theories. They're just hypotheses, right? I mean, it's not being stated that this has to be this way, but they keep adding things to all of this. Meanwhile, see if they're pears or apples. The nice thing about all this is that we're learning about astronomy, we're learning about Jupiter, about Mars, about this and that. Ganymede, no. So why is this moon so interesting? A unique moon, a moon that they say is impossible, basically no one understands why it exists. So, from a tactical perspective, on the other hand, Ganymede is a perfect place. If you wanted to hide, for example, the field of hiding from your end, if it were, for example, outside, like us, the magnetic field would be key. A body of that size, just slightly larger than Mercury, should have cooled and solidified millions of years ago. The fact that it maintains an active dynamic core challenges standard thermal models. The audio captured by the Juno waves on June 7, 2021 would officially be plasma waves converted into sound. They say there's an abrupt frequency change when entering the magnetosphere, which technicians call a plasma transition. The signals intelligence analysts call it an encryption change. This magnetic shield creates a bubble, they say, of natural interference, which would blind any ground radar trying to scan what's under the ice. I mean, from the same structure of this moon, it would encrypt any information coming from there, assuming they send a signal. Well, the signal for us would come in or go out encrypted. That so-called plasma transition, as they've named it, sounds wild, but is really just its magnetic field, like a natural interference bubble. Well, I don't know, but it really leaves a lot to think about. And at least to analyze and talk about it here with you all, well, this whole thing is super interesting. What do you think? I'd love to know your opinion, and later on we'll keep talking about these and other really interesting news stories.